Today, we're going to talk about one of the most debated questions in the breakup world. How long after no contact will it take for an ex to reach out? It sounds like a simple curiosity, but the truth behind this question exposes something much deeper: our fear of being forgotten, our hunger for validation, and our misunderstanding of what no contact is truly for. There are two things you need to know. First, on average, do exes even reach out during no contact at all? And second, if they do, how long does it actually take? But before we rush into answers, pause for a moment, because this isn't just about timing. This is about truth, about what happens in the quiet when you stop chasing someone else, and finally start finding yourself again. If that's something you're ready to explore, like the video and subscribe to Stoic Station, and let's begin. We're often told that if we simply disappear, they'll come running back. That if we stay silent long enough, the absence will haunt them, and the weight of our distance will crack open their regret. It sounds seductive, because it promises control during a time when you feel like you've lost all of it. But that's not the truth. That's the illusion. The breakup industry has packaged no contact as some kind of emotional magic trick. Do this, and they'll come back. Say nothing, and suddenly you're the one in power. But when you've lived it, when you've sat in the silence long enough, you learn something different. The truth is, no contact isn't a spell you cast to manipulate someone else's heart. It's not a shortcut to reconciliation, and it's certainly not a guarantee that they'll come crawling back, no matter how many coaches or videos tell you otherwise. It's a quiet, uncomfortable, necessary reckoning with yourself, because if the only reason you're going silent is to trigger a reaction from her, then you're not healing, you're performing. And she can feel that. They always do. I'll admit it. There was a time I believed in that version of no contact too. I thought that if I just stayed quiet long enough, she'd start to miss me, regret would kick in, and I'd be back in control. But after years of real experience, real data, and raw conversations with men who've lived it, I've changed my mind. No contact is not about controlling her actions. It's about reclaiming your center. It's not about making her chase you. It's about stopping the chase altogether, especially the one you've been running inside your own head. And that's when the reality hits harder than anything else. Because when we looked at the numbers, when we stripped away the narratives and just asked men who'd actually completed no contact, what happened, what we found was sobering. In our private support group, we ran a poll. We asked a simple question: did your ex reach out to you during no contact? Most men thought the answer would be yes. After all, if silence creates longing, if emotional freedom being taken away creates reactance, then surely she'd reach out. Surely the silence would speak louder than words. But what we found was this: 62% of those men never heard a word back. Let that settle. More than half of the men who did everything right, who stayed quiet, who respected the space, who waited with hope, got nothing in return. Not a message, not a call, just silence. And the reason this hits so deeply is because it shatters the most common belief men carry into no contact, that if I just wait long enough, she'll come back. That if I disappear, she'll realize what she lost. But for the majority of people, that moment never comes. And that's not a message designed to crush you. It's a message designed to wake you up. Because the pain of waiting is multiplied tenfold when it's tied to false expectations. If you start no contact believing it's a formula that guarantees her return, then every day of silence becomes a wound. Every hour she doesn't respond feels like rejection, and eventually that pressure builds until you cave in and reach out. Not from strength, but from desperation, and that's the moment you surrender your power without even knowing it. No contact isn't supposed to be a game of chicken to see who breaks first. It's not a countdown to a reunion. It's the beginning of a process that leads back to yourself. And that process begins when you stop using silence as bait and start using it as space. Space to rebuild, to detach, to reflect, to finally see that this isn't about her realizing your value, it's about you remembering it. What makes no contact powerful isn't that it brings her back, it's that it brings you back to calm, to clarity, to emotional self-respect. And ironically, it's only when you reach that place that reconnection, if it happens at all, has a chance of being real. Until then, everything else is just noise, driven by fear, fueled by longing, and disguised as love. So no, most exes won't reach out during no contact, and that's not a failure, that's feedback. The silence you give is not supposed to spark obsession, it's supposed to reveal truth. And sometimes that truth is this: she's not coming back. Not now, maybe not ever, but you are. And that's the entire point. You're not here to chase certainty. You're here to rebuild what was shaken inside of you. But in order to do that, you also need to understand the emotional terrain you're walking through. Because while most exes won't reach out during no contact, some do. And for those 38% who heard from their ex, the timeline tells its own story. We gathered the data from real people who followed through, men who kept their silence, who didn't reach out, who didn't fold under pressure. The shortest wait? 3 days. The longest? 60. But the average, the most common window when something shifted and she finally broke the silence, was 28 days. That number matters more than you think, because most men don't walk into no contact expecting 4 weeks. They expect a week, maybe 10 days at most. But when the first week passes and their phone stays silent, panic creeps in. Doubt grows, and suddenly the mind starts whispering old fears. Maybe she forgot you. Maybe she moved on. Maybe if you just text once, she'll remember. And that's where most men fall. They mistake time for rejection, and in doing so, they abandon the very thing that was quietly working in their favor: patience, emotional stability, self-respect. All of it sacrificed for a hit of short-term relief. But if you know that 28 days is the average, if you understand that the silence needs space to work, then you hold your line not out of stubbornness, but out of clarity. And clarity is power, because in this space, it's not the one who moves first that wins, it's the one who remains grounded while the silence does its work. Still, even with this knowledge, there's another layer few talk about. A psychological force that makes no contact either deeply effective or quietly ignored. It's called reactance. In simple terms, it means when someone feels like they've lost their freedom, they instinctively want it back. So, in theory, your silence should trigger her to reach out, should spark something. But theory isn't always reality. And that's where emotional nuance enters the picture. Because if your ex is someone with an avoidant attachment style, your silence might not feel like loss. It might feel like peace. It might validate the emotional distance she was already craving. In that case, no contact doesn't pull her closer. It gives her room to breathe. And she won't chase that quickly. Maybe not at all. That's why managing your expectations is more than just about time. It's about emotional complexity. You're not just navigating silence. You're navigating her psychology, her patterns, and yours. No contact isn't just a strategy. It's a mirror. It shows you what happens when you stop reaching, when you stop filling the space with noise. And sometimes what it reflects is uncomfortable. She doesn't miss you the way you thought she would, or she needs longer, or she was never capable of the depth you were searching for to begin with. But if you're willing to look into that mirror without flinching, something shifts. You stop basing your healing on her response. You stop timing your growth by her silence. And in that stillness, you begin to see yourself again, unfiltered, unchaste, and finally free. That's why knowing the timeline helps. That's why understanding reactance matters, because when you know what to expect and what not to, you stop spinning your wheels, you stop chasing ghosts, and instead of waiting for her message, you start listening for your own. And once you've faced the mirror of silence long enough, once you've understood the emotional layers of time, expectation, and attachment, there's another test waiting, the test of consistency. Because it's not just about how long you stay silent, it's about whether you can stay silent with conviction. And the hard truth is, most men don't. They crack, they restart, they make no contact a cycle instead of a decision. And every time they do, they water down its meaning. We've looked closely at the patterns, men who go through multiple rounds of no contact, each time hoping for a different outcome, each time convincing themselves that this time she'll feel it. But what we found was sobering. The first time, their ex might reach out after 25 days. The second time, 40. The third, nothing. Because each time you break no contact, you're not just reaching out. You're signaling that your silence has terms and conditions. You're showing her that your boundaries are flexible, that your peace has a price. And the more she sees that, the less impact your silence carries. What was once powerful becomes predictable. It's like playing the same card over and over in a game she's already learned how to win. The suspense is gone. The weight is gone. No contact only holds value when it's backed by something real, dignity, not strategy. It has to feel final to her, not conditional, otherwise she'll wait you out. She won't chase because she knows eventually you'll cave. And once she knows that, the dynamic shifts. She's no longer wondering if you've moved on. She's waiting for proof you haven't. This is why the way you carry silence matters more than the silence itself. It's not the absence that creates power. It's your willingness to honor it, even when it hurts. Even when every part of you wants to break it. That's the difference between temporary silence and transformative stillness. And yet, even when you do everything right, even when you hold your line and don't reach out, the timeline might stretch further than you ever imagined. That's when the real patience gets tested. Take the story of one man who started no contact with all the right intentions. But by day 15, doubt crept in. He reached out, no response, not even acknowledgement. So he went back into silence, not out of strategy, but because he had nothing left to say. And for 60 long days, nothing, no signs, no breadcrumb texts, just silence. Until one day his phone rang. It was her, 60 days later. That's the kind of timeline most men don't prepare for, because we've been trained to believe that if she doesn't reach out quickly, she never will. But what if that's not true? What if the space she needs to feel your absence is longer than you anticipated? What if your willingness to wait, not as a tactic, but as a commitment to yourself, is the very thing that shifts everything? The uncomfortable truth is this: most men aren't looking for love when they break no contact. They're looking for relief, a message, a sign, something to hold on to so the silence doesn't feel so heavy. But that kind of reaching doesn't rebuild trust. It reveals your need, and nothing suffocates attraction faster than need disguised as action. So if you're going to do no contact, do it fully. Not as a pause between messages, not as a strategy with an expiration date, but as a moment to reclaim your emotional balance. Because if you can't withstand the discomfort of the silence, you're not ready for what might come after it. And if you break it just to soothe the ache, you'll end up right where you started. Except now, she knows the silence means nothing. And once that happens, it's not her attention you've lost, it's your leverage. And once you've learned to hold the silence, Once you've resisted the urge to reach out and reclaimed your composure again and again, you begin to realize something deeper. That this entire journey was never about her in the first place. It felt like it at first. It always does. But with enough space and honesty, the truth starts to surface. No contact isn't for her, it's for you. The men who truly turn their lives around after heartbreak, the ones who do the work and come out stronger, they aren't the ones obsessing over when she'll call back. They're the ones who stop waiting altogether. They use the silence not as a punishment, but as a reset. They rebuild their routines. They strengthen their boundaries. They wake up early again, start moving their bodies again, open their minds to something higher again. They stop chasing and start creating. And somewhere along the way, they stop needing her validation to feel like they matter. That's when everything shifts. Because when you no longer need her attention to feel grounded, when your worth is no longer tied to whether she notices you or not, something powerful happens. You become magnetic, not because you're trying to be, but because you're no longer emotionally dependent. You don't carry the energy of lack anymore. You walk differently. You speak with more presence. You stop proving, and you simply are. That's the version of you she didn't get to see before, and ironically, it's often the version that brings her back around. But by then, you're no longer trying to get her back, and that's what makes you powerful. But most men don't make it to that version of themselves, not because they're weak, but because they're misled by expectation. That's the hidden enemy. It's not the silence that breaks them. It's what they believed would happen in the silence. They thought she'd message in 3 days. They thought the space would make her miss them instantly. They thought if they just showed restraint, she'd feel the loss and come running back. And when none of that happens, not on day 3, not on day 7, not even after a few weeks, panic sets in. The brain scrambles for certainty, and that's when the self-sabotage begins. One message just to check in, one story reply just to stay visible, one call just to remind her you still care. But that one moment of weakness rewrites the entire narrative. The silence that once held power now looks performative. The mystery becomes noise, and the opportunity for real change slips through your hands. The data doesn't lie. Of all the men we studied, only 1 in 10 heard from their ex within 3 days. Most had to wait weeks. Some waited months, and some never heard back at all. But the ones who grew through the silence were never defined by whether she came back or not. They were defined by what they built in her absence. That's why expectations are so dangerous. They don't just distort reality, they sabotage your growth. Because when your peace is tied to an outcome, you're never truly free. The moment you expect her to come back on your timeline, you've already lost your center. But when you let go of the timeline, when you stop counting the days, when you accept that healing isn't linear and people aren't predictable, that's when the spiral stops. That's when the pressure lifts. And that's when you can finally breathe again without needing her to be the reason. Expect less, accept more, let the process be what it is, not what you hoped it would be. Because in the end, it's not about how long it takes her to reach out. It's about how long it takes you to come back to yourself and stay there. Summary. And when you finally let go of the timeline, when the urge to check your phone fades, when her silence no longer defines your day, something shifts inside you. You begin to feel the weight of your own presence again. You start showing up, not for her, but for the man you're becoming. And if there's one thing worth remembering through all of this, it's this. You're not waiting for her to come back. You're waiting for yourself to come back to life. That's the part no one tells you at the start. No contact feels like a strategy to get her attention, but it's actually a path back to your emotional clarity. Most men treat it like a countdown to a text, measuring its success by how quickly she reaches out, if she does at all. But the real message isn't the one that shows up on your screen. It's the one that grows inside you when you don't break. When you hold the silence, not out of pride or punishment, but because you've outgrown the need to beg for connection. You begin to see that your worth was never supposed to hinge on her response, that you were never meant to earn back love by proving how much you hurt. And the second you stop trying to force that proof, when you stop chasing, stop hoping she notices, stop replaying every memory like a broken loop, that's the moment healing actually begins. It's not about forgetting her. It's not about pretending she didn't matter. It's about realizing that the love you gave away so freely, it's time you offered it to yourself, not as a rebound, not as a reaction, but as a return. The strength of no contact isn't in how many days you last without speaking. It's in who you become during those days. And once you realize that the silence wasn't meant to change her, it was meant to awaken you, you'll stop counting time as if it's slipping away. You'll understand that this space, this quiet, this stillness was never a pause. It was the beginning. And it's only from that place, anchored, restored, fully present, that anything meaningful can begin again, whether with her or without her. But by then, you won't be waiting anymore. You'll be living. If this message grounded something real in you, like the video and subscribe to Stoic Station, because sometimes the silence you give the world is the voice that finally frees you.